All right, so let me welcome everybody back to Sessions with Nana Sakyi. This is our third session,
Yes.
and based on when we first started this, we pretty much had something laid out in terms of what we wanted to develop and what were the things that we wanted to talk. But we also had in mind of just keeping it very organic and allowing the conversation really to dictate the things that came out.
Hmm.
So the first one, we went into things dealing with family inheritance, shrines, shrine structures, and how to get those things in place and some things that were suggested. And then from that conversation, we went to our second one where we talked about the things that are kind of associated with a comb. And the
Yeah.
conversation ended up really being priest heavy. But one of the major things that we got out of that is that there are other parts of a comb that people probably just aren't aware of.
Hmm.
And as a result of not being aware of, Nana Setchi thought that it was a good idea to present those aspects of a comb so that people can find a place where they're at home. So everyone should not be in Akom.For or Bosunfo. There are many roles that people can play in it. So this presentation will kind of center around those other areas of a comb. And with that being said, Anasechi,
Oh, thank
I
you
turn
very
it over
much.
to you.
Thank you very much, Nana. It's always a great pleasure to be here to share the information. And basically, it's also helping us to find ourselves because I believe the information is already out there. We just have to take the time and look for it or to recognize it. My belief is that all shrines have these information that is attached to them, and it's not unique to any one particular group or shrine. And that is just a matter of us seeking it out and finding it. As Nana stated, like, yes, it's very Akom heavy, and I think that's something we're talking about in the future to do something just specifically for that. But today I wanted to focus on the people who are part of the shrine and may want to find what role they may have within and what contribution they can have to the shrine structure and also for themselves personal development. But before I get into that, let's kind of review some things. If anyone has any questions or any things that they needed further clarification based on our conversation last week, let us take a moment and discuss those things before we move on to the next set of information. So if anyone, again, have any questions or anything that was covered last session that they want clarification to, this is the moment. Because again, I don't want to treat it like a lecture that I'm sitting here talking and lecturing people, but more of a conversation. All I'm doing is bringing things out for you to talk about and see where it can benefit you in any way. So if there are any questions, please let's take this time to do that. Okay, so I gathered based on that everyone is satisfied. So let's talk about what other people can learn in the shrine because as I've always stated, and those here at the house know that this has been my approach, that I believe in letting people find themselves in that environment rather than initiating or saying, you fill this role, you take this position, take this position. I believe we have something in us that naturally we gravitate or that helps us to gravitate to something in our environment. And I believe if we allow people to be, they will naturally gravitate if they're given the opportunity to do so rather than being told, I want you to fill this role, I want you to do this, et cetera, because with that, I believe it brings the uncertainty or the anxiety of disappointment. If I'm not able to fulfill this role, am I going to disappoint the Akom.For or the elder or whomever it is? But if you're naturally gravitate to doing those things, there's no one that you can disappoint because it's coming naturally out of you. So the list I have here is just basically brief. It does not get involved, and I intentionally did that because I believe the work should be done by you if you show an interest in it. I'm just giving some clues for some things, and that is up to you to pursue it and delve and make it part of your life. And I'm starting out with basically the first thing everybody's aware of, the Adrinkra symbols. I'm not getting into the meaning behind them or any of that, but just presenting what the overall objective of it. But again, not getting too in depth to explain it in its totality. I think you should, or the individual should take that opportunity and use it to delve deeper, make it their passion. And again, I'm talking to others who feel, well, how can I use this to contribute to the shrine? You can, because a shrine is made up of many people with many different minds and very many different talents, and all can contribute to that. And if we have the opportunity, we'll go into the shrine structure tonight if we have enough time and explain more specific what those roles are or those responsibilities, and people can naturally gravitate to those based on their inherent talent. So again, the Adrinkra is basically Adrinkra, and Kra means to notify, Din name, or something that we use to send message. And again, the word we talk about in Krabia, the Kra or Kradin, all of those things are pretty much connected to this to some degree. Again, I'm giving just a brief description of them. And the Dinkra are very elaborate. Some of them are based on geometric shapes, on plants, animals, and different types of metaphorical aspects and patterns. And they serve as what we will call a reminder of knowledge, almost what the ayan or the drum text represent. And this is something I've said before, that everyone may have an association with a song that they hear that remind them either of a childhood or of an experience or some journey or some romance or whatever it is. When you hear the song, it takes you back into that time, puts you back into that frame of mind and space. And every time you hear it, you go back to that moment. This is what the Adinkra also represents. They are symbols that within themselves inherit knowledge. Even if we don't have it in our conscious effort, they're a part of our subconscious. And when we see it, it brings out those knowledge. So when we see it, we understand, oh, this means this means that. And I think that is the state we have to take these designs and patterns to. And in order to do that, we have to become immersed in it, where we identify with it. And I think that is a very important ingredient, that we are not just looking at them and treating it in an academic way or in learning way of reading a book or a text or memorization, but it is something that actually reflects within you, that connects to something in you. And the Dinkras basically represent that. Like one of them, let me see this one. I don't know if everyone see this one here, particular that I'm pointing to.
The eye.
It's called Obodia Santan, and that's what I started. Obodia Santan, refliti. Now, Biani ho, and that represents at the beginning of time, that when the Creator created everything, no one was there. And so, therefore, that is a symbol that is used for that. And then it says, no one is there except Nyame, therefore receive Nyame, Jin Nyame, Jin Nyame. So that every time you see that, it will bring that out. Other one is this one, Denchen Fufrafu, Yafunu Fufrafu, mixed up crocodiles with belly, that they have one stomach, but they fight over food. Why? If I eat, or if this one eats, it goes in the same stomach with all benefits. So we don't have to fight. So again, it speaks of our relationship, that we are all fighting or competing over things. When one gets it, we can all benefit. And you see this as part of the culture. So again, these Adinkra symbols are not only reminding us of our character and our behavior, but also telling us how we should behave in terms of sharing. And it reminds me that sometimes we all compete and want to do something, but if we send someone to do it, by all means, they will go and bring it back to us and we will benefit from it. So I don't have to compete with this person to go and get that. No, I want to go. No, let this person go. No, and I'm upset, et cetera, et cetera. Why? We will all benefit. So again, these Adrinkra symbols serves that purpose as well. And so as we become more familiar with them, I think, we can become much
Now,
better human beings.
let me ask you a question in reference to the Adinkra symbols. There's so many of them.
Yes.
So, in terms of the creation, like, is it like a clan that just created it? How did it just become common knowledge, common folk? Like, everybody's aware of the Adinkra symbols, but it's like, well, where did they come from? Like, who created the Adinkra symbols? Is it a particular clan created them, and then everybody started creating their own, or like, where does that
Well,
knowledge come from?
well, a lot of that is attributed to the Bono Adrinkra Henry, the chief in the Ivory Coast, or what they call Jama, was very well known for these Adinkras, but he was part of the Bono Empire when they went there. So, but you brought up a good point. If you study the Adinkras, you'll find that they're old pattern, which are ancient. But then you see new Adinkras that evolve. And also, as the people evolve and change, it is the people that create the Adinkra and the needs for the people and the environment. You see, some of them are very heavily Christian. Some of them are heavily Muslim because the people have converted to Christianity and they've converted to Islam, and they do it. And then some you see with razor blades, modern things. You see some with Mercedes Benz, and you see them are continually evolving. And so it is up to you to discriminate between where you want to stand in terms of following the trend of the new Adinkra. So they are evolving. So I would say these are younger people that are creating and contributing to Adinkra. So when you begin to really study the whole text of Adinkra, you will be able to see these are the older ones, these are the modern ones, and these are the ones that are dealing with the technology and the age. So that speaks a lot of what Adinkra represents as well. So it fits the need of everyone. So it's just a matter of where you want to stand in terms of that. Yeah. So this is something that, again, and you see that in terms of when we get into and make Proverbs. If you really understand, and this is something to really grasp the culture so that one can begin to discriminate like what is influenced by the West and the modern world and what is from the ancient tradition. And you see, as Europeans come into more the culture, they begin to change and they begin to add things to the proverbs, and the people who have converted to those practices carry on those proverbs as well. So a lot of times you have to go through them with a fine tooth and comb to say, okay, these are more modern. They're not really part of the culture, but they have adapted to the minds of people based on their relationship with other people. And then you have those that are just within the culture that evolves within the people environments. So that is something I leave up to everyone to basically make those choices. Okay, so again, there are many texts out. The most popular one is by Cristalla, who's I think over 3,000. Adinkra, I'm talking about Proverbs. He wrote that, but let's stick to Adinkra. There are some texts that are written by, what is his name? I can't remember his name, but he wrote a book. There are two popular books on Adinkra. One is Cloth as a Metaphor. So that's a very popular book that deals with Adinkra, and it has a lot of the modern Adrinkra that has evolved over a period of time, as well as the ancient. So that's a good book. Cloth as a metaphor, and one called Adrinkra by, I think it's a Westerner, if I'm correct, that he also wrote a very popular book on Adrinkra. So those are two by far very good books. If anyone wants me to get the names, I can look them up briefly and share them with you. But I would implore everyone to really pursue those, understand them, and also they become, to me, what I've done with them, began to draw them and use them as part of art design. So that way I'm becoming more familiar with the patterns of the Adinkras, as well as memorizing what they represent and also becoming more familiar with them. and they're quite interesting designs. So there's a lot of things you can do with Adinkra. So the next thing, and also remember, these are also related to proverbs and also conduct that even within the shrine, that you will see that people can use this pattern to convey a message without directly saying to that person what the intent is. And the Adinkra can serve that purpose as well. So the next one is Asesidra, which is a very important aspect. Again, it follows in the same vein of Adinkra. They are personal stools. And something we should be very careful with is that each stools, we should become familiar with the knowledge of stools, because a lot of times we as Akom.For, we as lay people go and want to collect stools, but we should be very careful because some stools are only delegated or relegated to certain people, certain families. For example, it says that it's illegal for anyone to put on the market a stool that a chief wore, sat upon. So again, if somehow someone got a hold of this, put it on the market and you're buying it, then you are encroaching upon someone's territory. And a lot of it is very personal. So this particular one is called Sechijua. No, actually, no, it's not Sechijua. It's a particular Asesidra, which represents a stool of authority. And here again, Ratcher, I think in his book, give a list of a number of stool, and there's one written by Peter Sapon who gives a well-documented knowledge of stools and the different type of stools. And so these are things people can research and develop themselves. So the stools can display your gender, your status, your family, and also your identity. And they are also, of course, the repository of our souls. So you find that no one just go and sit on a stool, except certain people of privilege. They're allowed to sit on certain stools. For example, in the Shrine House in Techiman, where I was trained, my father sat on a stool. When I was carrying the busum, I was allowed to sit on that stool as well. But it's not necessarily his personal stool, but it's for the busum and carrying that. So you can have a personal stool as well as a stool that is relegated for carrying the busum, as well as a stool that the busum sits upon. And all of this, we have to really begin to know that. And so the stools also are subjected to taboos and also certain rituals that we have to, and they have certain proverbs that are associated with them. So we have to begin to identify which stool we can sit upon and which we cannot. And of course, these are the stools when a chief passes or queen mother, they would blacken these stools for them. And normally, from my experience, normally that's only done for queen mothers and chiefs, that the black stools were used in terms of their lineage. And so again, it's important as we begin to become identified with stool, we know the history behind it, the purpose of the stool, the gender of the stool, and how we can use it. Or is it something that I can use for myself in terms of being a lay person or being an Akom.For? So especially for lay people, that I would advise them to really take time, study the stool, understand, don't just get attracted to, oh, it looks beautiful or it's cute, but really understand what it signifies and what proverb that is associated and who is associated with as well. And that way you will be in a safe zone. And of course, we always tilt them before when we get up from them, so that no spirit sits upon them. So that's very important. Any questions so far based on what I'm discussing? And again, I'm being general, not too specific, because I want you to take the time and research it, do the development of that, gain the knowledge, and personalize it. Okay. So the next thing is chinye, which are basically the umbrella. And now this is very important. Those of you who've seen my shrine logo, which is here now, this is not how it was originally intended. It would look like this. It had double umbrella, which is associated with the Bono, and that they carried it And I had that logo for quite a while. But then my conscience get the better of me. Again, like I said, knowledge brings with it power. And again, we have to know if we are encroaching upon territory we should not. Since this stool is Techuman Hene, I mean, this umbrella is Techuman's Hene, and he's the main one that uses it. If I just a Akom.For using it, I'm competing with him and putting myself on that status. And so I just one day decided to eliminate the top aspect of it and use only the bottom part, which is the more popular part of it. So again, this is what I'm talking about, that as we begin and get more knowledge of things, we can understand how we can navigate in this world so that we don't create offenses or problems with ourselves by using things without really knowing the cultural ramification. So the umbrella is very important. The umbrella is not only used to protect and cover the chiefs so that the sun does not beat on them, but we use it to make announcement, like chiefs when they're celebrating the Yam Festival, as well as the Akom.For will take the umbrella and put it in their compound so that anyone seeing it or any bosom flying or moving around will see, yes, this person at this particular time is celebrating his Yam Festival, or she's celebrating her Yam Festival, or this chief is celebrating, this Queen Mother is celebrating the Yam Festival. So this becomes a very important aspect. I've been searching for one, but it's bringing it back. So, but I hope to get one day and bring it back so that when I'm celebrating my Yam Festival, I can put it in the compound, the yard, so that the ancestors and the spirit around can say, okay, I'm in a state of doing my Yam Festival, et cetera, et cetera. So the chinya becomes a very important tool. So again, within them, the fabrics, the cloth that is used to cover them all have meaning. And so you have people who are particular expert in these fields of creating this. They may not be in the sense of a priest or a chief, but they're just lay people like everyone that has that knowledge, and therefore it's a benefit to a chief, a queen mother, a Akom.For, whomever can use it. So that kind of talent is very needed in terms of Akom, how we practice here.
I have a quick question. Does everybody know what Yam Festival is? Everybody on this call, are you aware of Yam Festival? What's the Yam Festival? That was a question.
No.
Okay.
Joy, okay.
So, okay, so let me take some
Oh.
time to explain it. Yam Festival, of course, is well, I don't want to get into the history of it where they talk about in the forest where they first discovered the yam and then later on it becomes a festival. But the term Yam Festival we call Afashe. Afa, Afa means half celebrate. She celebrate. Afa means half. And so in growing the yam, one basically do certain rituals. And I'm kind of editing part of its celebration, why it's called half, because there's another part I have to connect to it to make it more complete, but I'll do that after. So the Yam Festival is basically that when you are planting the yam, the person abstain from any type of relationship, they purify themselves in a state of mind, and they go to farm and they plant these yams. And then they pray to the ancestors and the spirits and the creator to bring adequate rain, adequate sunshine, so that these yams will grow. And so when they grow, they have to test and see if they're mature. And so when they're mature, then you will have your celebration after that. For example, in Techiman, the first one to eat yam is Tamensa. He's the chief of the town and the main bosom for the town. So one of his children will go eat the yam and come back and relate to the father, said it is good. And then he will celebrate his yam festival. And so after Tamensa eats, then all of the other bosom, subsequent people can engage in yam festival, but no one does it before Tamensa. Now, in planting the yam is a very important ritual to be done. When you have the yam, the top, left, and right is cut off. You don't eat that. So we never eat the complete yam. Those are what are planted or the seeds that can be replanted for it is one. So that's one aspect of why it's called half celebration. We don't consume all of the yam and we always leave some behind for food security. That's one. Another important aspect of Yam Festival is the Apple Festival. Now, this is what happens first. So the Apple Festival is clearing the town, the environment, and everything to make preparations for the Yam Festival. And so that again is associated with Taminsa, and it's allowed to bring about peace and tranquility within the town. I'm not going to get too in depth in it and explain too much of the ritual, but just briefly go through it. And so once the date is set for Apple,
Okay. We seem to have lost Nana Sakyi, so I'm sure he'll be back on shortly. So, one of the things with the Yam Festival, and I think it's probably clear, and we can get some clarification. Our Yam Festival or the Yam Festival, like in America, we do the Ojira, right? So, and then, but as I'm learning about this as well, it varies from region to region to region. So the last time I was in Ghana was in February of this year, and they were having a yam festival for one of the shrines there. But we're already 6 months into the year, and they're having the festival again. So one of the things that's key is that when he was saying Tom Mensa has to have a yam festival or the yams presented to him first, and then all the Bosoons within that pantheon, based on their age, will also end up having yam festivals. So you'll have yam festivals, I don't know, throughout the year. I don't know to when it starts but it's definitely something that's regional. In the Bono area, they call them yam festivals, I think, and the Aqua Pim area. They call it Ojira. I think the Ojira is specifically for the Aqua Pim people, but I think now the Ashanti people also have an Ojira. So, but Sessa, I think you're on. Can you speak to that with the Ojira for the Ashanti or in that area?
Hey, can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm walking onto an airplane right now to travel. So my
Okay.
apologies. But so the Asante do the Yam Festival, but there's a part of it which is the Ojira. So because Ojira refers to like a cleansing, right? And so there's a portion for like the Asante Yam Festival where we go to whatever river our bosom are seated at. Um, and you do the major offering, like you do that first cow there, but then you're calling all of the ancestors, all the busum, you do that first cow. And then that in that moment, that is the Odrida for the Yam Festival. But then also it depends on where you go. So different towns will do it differently as well.
Right.
Um, so like the if like the chief is like the Hene of the town is doing Ojira, that's a little bit different than like the Akom.For doing the Ojira and some of the rituals that have to be done or how that goes. Because a lot of times the Ojira, at least for the Santi, from what I understand, if it's at the Hene level, it's for the ancestors via the blackened stools, which are the property of the
Chief.
Hene exactly. So
Mhm.
that's what I know.
Okay. Okay.
sorry about that. I forgot to plug my computer in.
Okay.
Okay, so technology can't win sometimes. Okay, I don't know exactly what took place since I got disconnected, but as we were talking about the Apple, which again clears the path for the Yam Festival where they purify the state and remove all contamination, all negativity, and the people themselves remove it from them. So when they move into the Yam Festival, they approach it within a clear frame of mind.
So one of the things that was asked was whether or not I was telling them like with the Aqua Pim people, they have the Ojira, and I was also
Right.
asking Brother Kweku as well about the Ojira in
Yes.
the Ashanti region in terms of how that was. And
Right.
his statement was a portion of it where they have an Ojira, which simply dealing with the cleansing. And then he was also making the distinction between whether or not something was put on by the chief or by an Akom.For, in terms of some of the things are done there in that area. So I'm not sure if that's applicable to the Bono people as well.
Well, far as my experience, and I have been to both the Chiefs, the Techiman Hennes Yam Festival, as well as the Bosom Yam Festival. And the only difference is that you, they cannot celebrate this unless they deal with Tamensa. So the chief consults the priest to make sure that is a proper to do his Yam Festival.
Mm.
And he clears the path because again, Tamensa makes sure that all the rituals and proper things are done, whether it's for the ancestors or the Bosom. He's in charge of that to make sure that all of the rituals are done, because if the chief doesn't do the proper rituals, then it can create calamity or misfortune of the state. So in terms of celebrating, the days are the same in terms of the celebration, except there they have bosom, because every chief has a bosom which is attached to them, to their palace. And also they have, of course, they're responsible for the blackened stools. So I went, and also he purifies. So everything that we do as Akom.For, the chief does to a large degree, and especially except we don't deal with the ancestors. That's the main the political aspect, more so with the chief. I was not privy to go into the ancestral room because that's not my domain, but I was there witnessing all the other important chiefs going in there and they're doing rituals, making sacrifice, etc., etc. Also, they purify the soul of the chief, and he's treated the same way as how we purify the soul of the Busum, meaning he sits back, he dressed in regular clothes, that looks like average people, like anyone, and the person whose soul is being purified, dressed in gold, kente, and great ornament, and they purify his soul. And again, that's the same thing we do with the Busum on its Yam Festival, that we get a child that is born on the same day as the Busum, and it represents the Kra, or the soul of the Busum, and we purify that soul of that child, a child who's like maybe 3, 4, 5 years old, and we purify them, and they're dressed up in gold, kentes, wear sandals in the shrine room. They wear all of the trappings of the Akom.For or the Busum, and we purify the soul of the Busum that way. So there's a similarity in that sense with it. The only thing is that the chief does deal more with the ancestors, which are the ancient chiefs that founded the town or contributed to the development. Also the queen mothers, they are in the stool house, and that part not everyone is privy to. But everything else in terms of him celebrating his Yam Festival is pretty much the same from observing. But yes, of course, that may be unique to different towns, because it's unique that every town should practice it and express it in their own way within their own environment. And I think there's plenty of room for that. That gives it its uniqueness. And also, they refer to it by different terms. I believe that people call it homo, if I understand that term right. Others call it, I think, the Ojira, and we just say afashe. So those are the terms that we use to distinguish how we practice it. But I think there's very similarities between all of them, and maybe uniqueness that may be among them that makes it special among those people, which I think adds a very good dimension to it and flavor, because if everybody was doing everything the same, well, then it's nothing unique, but everyone does it uniquely within their cultural environment. I think that is very special, that it gives it some very unique qualities to their celebration. So I think that's a very good thing to do. So
Nana, you want to share your slides?
yes, I'm getting ready to go back to it
All right,
again.
I think I gotta put you back on as co-host. Okay, you're
Okay,
right.
so So again, I talk basically about the umbrella. And again, the chief would put his umbrella out. That is unique to his authority, to his status, et cetera, to represent it. So when you see that Achinye, you know that this chief is celebrating his Yam Festival. When you see another time, you know which chief is celebrating. And you see that all throughout the town. And also the Bosom. So it becomes very personal in that sense, you know. So again, the next aspect is the color theory. And this is something that I began to understand more in my training aspect, that we use primarily 3 colors, you know, that there are more to it, as you see on the list. But the 3 main colors in training Akom were Fufu or Fita, Cocoa, and Tumtum. And Fufu is white, Cocoa is red, Tumtum is black. And so sometimes they blend the two with Bibri, black and blue, almost synonymous in many respects. And we use them interchangeably, but they represents 3 phases of energy and also represent 3 phases of Bosom. So not only that it represents the nature of the bosom, the nature of the environment and the energy, but also in part of training that we use them. So some people will see bosom, we wear red, they put on their face, under the eye, they use that. Mostly puts black under his eye, he wears that. Sometimes people use bese color and they would grind it and put it under, or some red substance. Or sometimes they'll use moto for the black, and some bosom will just cover their face and completely. And a lot of that speaks of the nature of the bosom. While Tano, or what most water bosom, uses white. Very few water bosom I see use black or anything, because it speaks of the nature. And most of your brafo, whether they are bosom or suman, and mostly suman, you see them with using either red or black. Some bosom may use black, but very rare you see that. Most of them use white because they are from the water element. So those 3 colors are synonymous. And of course, the white represents purity, cleanliness. Shre is also used to symbolize that, and also to accomplish things. When one accomplishes something, and in fact, you see that in traditional court, you say, would the bim, would the fo? If you are guilty or innocent, they use white shade to put on the innocent person when they have traditional court to mark or symbolize this person is free of guilt. And
So I have a question on this with these colors. So one, you know, when I think of stuff like this, or when I see these things, or what triggers in my mind is
I
white
know,
supremacy and white
exactly, yes,
racism, like, oh, you know, like white is right type situation.
right.
So you're saying this is a color theory that was developed by Ghanaians, or is this something that um was influenced by colonialization in terms of saying white is better than black?
Well, again,
I,
that's the problem we have in this hemisphere, that we can confuse those things. But you have to remember, the bosom goes back a long time, even before pre-colonial times. Some of them, some evolved after, but basically it represents the nature of the bosom. So they don't have that kind of prejudice of white being white, right, or white in that sense. And it's never been brought to me like that, because it symbolizes the power of purity and innocence of what white represents. Of course, when you're living in America, it's a whole different ball game here in terms of those colors, and it kind of confuses it a lot. But to them, the white represents it's the closeness to what clear, clean water would represent, and so that you're able to see it. So they wear white because the white represents a state of purity of my soul, that there's no contamination, because they say that if you wear something white and a drop of palm oil on it, you contaminate the whole cloth. It's no longer pure. So they have that proverb which speaks of that sense. So it also speaks of the soul or the sum of the person, that if you are aspiring to have a clean, pure mind, but within it you have thoughts that are negative, you're contaminating the whole thing. So in that sense, it represents things that are cool. It reflects things that are bad, because white also can repulse or remove things as well. when we know in black, it can attract and absorb things as well. But in that sense, it by no means was it ever explained to me or associated with the concept of what we have here about whiteness. And that is basically dealing with white supremacy and all of that. It's not been in any way associated with that. So
Nana, I'm sorry. I have a question when you're done.
go ahead.
It is my understanding that in Motia are also those three colors.
Yes. Well, yeah, mostly the two. Yes, they are. They talk about the black and the red type of mochi and the white. Yes, exactly. Go ahead. I'm listening.
No, that was my question.
Okay.
That they were those three colors. They were also the Motia were black, red,
Yes.
and white.
Correct. Yes.
Never seen a red one. I've seen a black one and a white one, but that they were those three colors.
Yeah, they talk about those. And I know when I was training, I was told never to attract them or entertain them, even though some people try to give me motia, but they said, don't do that. You know, I will invite problems. So I stayed away from them, you know, in terms of that. But I've met many Akom.For who are multi Akom.For. And in fact, my teacher, Nana Ifa, also had motia. Akuya Bomo, Kofi Asante, and those were his motias. And he had those before he got his Atano Bosom. So you will find a lot of people do use them. They're very popular. But I find we treat motia as messengers, and we attract them to the shrine by putting certain carvings and things that you can attract them to your shrine. But I was encouraged never to attract them because they sometimes misbehave and they can be problematic. So I never entertain motia in any shape or form, but I've been around people who are motia Akom.For, yes.
When we were trained, we were told that a Surgery is like the king of the Emotia, and you have a soul, you usually have Emotia around you, which I found to be very true. Never found them to be problematic, but I think it's the way that you approach them and how you deal with it.
No, I think it's the nature of them. Like I mentioned earlier, some are more problematic, some are less problematic. And so one has to, because the Moti are associated with Sasabonsam, and they are part of the forest. And there are aspects of what we call the children of Sasabonsam in the forest. And then you have some that are good in practice and some that are mischievous, that can be problematic. So a lot has to do with the nature of the spirit itself. But most people, from my understanding, try to attract the more cooler and more beneficial ones. And you hear of one that I've seen that are very dangerous as well. So I've seen both in that sense, that they will misbehave as well. In fact, if you read my book, I talk about one of them, which was trying to knock down a pillar that Nana Donko was under, and he was very disturbing to the family there. And that was a motia itself. So it depends on which one you attract, but like everything else, things have a dual nature or dual aspect, and some of it, but the motias are definitely well known in the tradition. But if you ask me, I'm the wrong person to give any advice much on motia other than what was explained to me during my training and what I've observed in terms of that. So I have no motia in any shape or form in terms of that.
You might need to provide a little explanation on Sasabonsam. What is that?
Okay. Sasabonsam is basically, how do you explain it? Ultimate negative energy that we say that it's like the forest itself has within it certain aspects of energy that if one is not careful, one can fall into danger. For example, if you go into a very dense forest, in there you have osebo, leopard, snake, different types of animals and different things that can endanger your well-being. And so if one is not able to navigate within that area, one can be trapped and do it. So you find that stories associated mostly with hunters and those who venture into the forest. And so within that collective energy there, one can encounter things. So that energy gives birth to other energies. So it's a both positive and negative. And Sasabonsam represents the father of that energy in terms of negativity within the forest, untamed itself.
So yeah, as I was like, yeah, untamed energy,
Yes,
uncontrolled, this
exactly.
chaotic energy is probably the better
Exactly.
word that you want to describe it as. Yes.
Yes, you can do that. And so a part of it is that you will find that some people is more or less taking that chaotic energy and containing it for their benefit. So like all energy, you can either use it positive or negative, no matter what. It depends on the person and the doing. And so you will find at the shrine, they have clubs and they have buffalo horns and things which represents negative energy. So some bosom say they have this, so I know what negative energy is like. So when it comes here, I know how to deal with it, or we have aspects that can deal with it. So they use it for a better quality, while others may use it for negativity, just like they say what Bai is. You have good witch and bad witch. And some people use it thereby for to say, I'm using it to benefit my family, not negativity. And you have some that are using it to harm or to compete with others so they may prosper and others do not. So you find that energy is all around. And so a lot of it has to do with the person and how they're using that energy. So in that forest, you will contain that. And so now the motia represents the children of this spirit. And some are good and beneficial, and some are negative, as far as what I've been told. And so, but they are the ones that can help you navigate within that environment. They're the ones that they say kidnaps future Akom.For and take them in that domain and train them and teach them the way to deal with that aspect of nature. And so you find those stories like like I mentioned, my brother Nanifu, who trained me, said he had a song, Obaiwa, Motiafano, 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 Obaiwa, meaning the young servant girl. The Motio took her into the forest. And when it took her into the forest, it trained her as a Akom.For, and then she came back with all the trappings and accoutrements of a Akom.For. And also, I was teased by the Motio. They said, when you come back here, I'm going to take you to the forest. And I laughed and said, sure, sure. And so everyone would have a big laugh. But that's their domain, is the forest, is where they function. And within that, as I mentioned, there's both positive and negative energy. And one has to navigate. That's why most hunters understand medicine more so than most people, because in that area, they have to navigate not only nature, but the spiritual forces and dealing with it at nighttime. So they have a lot of summons. They have fugu or batakari with talismans or sebe that is used to protect them in the terms of moving, encroaching in that environment. So they have a tremendous amount of power that is associated with them, and they carry the Conte stick, which again, they may encounter animals to protect themselves, and they are very spiritually strong. So again, these three colors again represents purity of light, so that we have day is associated with the light of the white, and the cocoa represents that time of day, which is a night becoming day or day becoming night, when you have a kind of orange or red color in the sky as the sun is setting and as it's rising. We ask the question, is it day becoming night or night becoming day? It represents that middle domain. And then the night, tung represents the darkness itself. So those are the three aspects in which Akom.For deals with, as well as spirits, in terms of what these colors represents in terms of training. And of course, there are other colors there, as I mentioned, as I have there, which they use, but not too much in terms of training and symbolism. But those three are the most powerful ones that they use. And of course, the cocoa represents blood, which is that red thing, is that day becoming night, night becoming day, and it represents agitation. So this agitation is like to change from a positive to negative state, or is it from a negative state to a positive state? And so that's why blood is associated with that middle category, with the red. Palm oil is associated with that middle category, with the red as well. And so we find that. And so those aspects are part of the training of Akom.For, but it's also part of the world in which their Khan functions with, along with the other different colors. So again, they say when we go to the shrine, we say, Nana Didifita. So we're saying it pure, it's clean, no contamination, no nothing. And so you hear this a lot around the shrine that their Akom.For or their Chami would say to the bosom, Didi Fita, Fita. And it's another way for clarity for the fufu as well. And that's why we use white egg fufu, kosia. The eggs are white, so it represents and symbolizes that. Shrey, as I mentioned, symbolizes that. So we're seeing all of that apart from the negativity that we will associate living in America, you know. Any questions? Okay. So again, these are things that I think we can explore because we need people who have taken the time and delve into it deeply and understand the hidden meanings of it. Again, I'm just scratching the surface of these things, but I leave it up to everyone to do that. Like, you know, another one which I see there on the list, akokusrade, yellow. So that is the fat of the chicken. That yellow is what to them yellow represents. So they say akoko chicken srade fat, or the grease or the oil of the animal. And so to them, that's what yellow represents, you know, and you see that every now and then, but we don't use it too much in terms of training, but you begin to identify when you're speaking of yellow, they will call it akokosradie. So the next one, everyone, I think should be familiar with, especially the use of eme proverbs, saying maxims, and how these, I think, are very instrumental in maintaining communications. They say it is the environment or the situation dictates the proverb. So you will find no one just says a proverb just for the sake of saying proverb. And you find that also within songs and shrine songs. A lot of times we sing songs, but we're singing them out of context, but just in order. These songs and these proverbs becomes means of communication. So as I'm talking to something and I'm saying something where someone will say, well, I'm not quite clear what you're saying. So they will interject a proverb to give me that idea that I'm not quite clear on what you're doing, or that if someone is doing something that should be private, they will say, Akom.For bajum, which means the chicken doesn't lay egg in a marketplace. So when someone wants to relate something to you private, they will say this, because in a marketplace, if a chicken lays egg, everybody will step on it. So the chicken will go somewhere private and lay its egg. So there's another way of saying, I have something to relate to you, but I can't say it now. I want to talk to you private. So they will use that proverb to say, Akom.For bajum. And so again, the situation would dictate what the proverb would bring. So that requires a tremendous amount of knowledge and study of the culture and how people behave in terms to understand what type of proverbs in order to use. You know, sensai nipatiani. And there's another one say, that's how human beings are. People do things, they say, hey, that's how human beings are. And so they'll use those kind of proverbs in terms of that. And the list goes on. And so I think it requires a tremendous amount of study and also understanding the nuances of conversation and the environment and how to use proverb, and also having a very large repository of proverbs to know when to bring that in. And so there are people who are very special in terms of understanding these and how they can guide you, how they can build character, and how they can add advice to a person's behavior, etc., and also teaches you lessons and help in your development. So proverbs are very important in that.
So an Ochami is generally trained in proverbs, correct?
Yes. Well, that's one of the things we talk about, but since you bring that up, Ochami is by far one of the most, I don't want to say respected person as much as the Ochami in our tradition is trained along with the Akom.For. He bathes the medicine, the Akom.For. He knows everything. In fact, in many sense, the Ochami is ahead of the Akom.For. And what I mean by that is that the Ochami understand the language of the Bosom. They speak a Potut Tree, which is an ancient dialect, and it's very archaic. And so it is not the language that you will hear among the common folks. It's an entirely different language, entirely different dialect, entirely different meaning to some degree. And in fact, some of the language of the Bosom is not modern in terms they cannot explain the terms. Like you say, Odrain, which is ram. The Bosom can't say that because to them, that's a modern terminology. And he will say a filthy animal or one that is filthy. And then you have to go to it and he said this one. And so you find that. And then he would refer to, in fact, Ochami is a modern term to show you how it is. The Bosom, when he speaks of his chami, he said, my tongue. He said, this is my tongue. So he doesn't use the term Ochami. We will translate it as such, but he was saying my tongue. So he's saying my Ochami. And then when he's referring to Akom.For, he don't use that term. He'll refer to people with the empesempese, they're here. And so that is part of training. So again, your chami is one who is very knowledgeable, not only in terms of all that I'm saying, in terms of everything, but also in Proverbs and also the language of the Bosom and also how they are made. When clients come and any information is given from the Bosom, their chami has it. And the Bosom is, or the Akom.For is relying, or the Bosom is relying on their chami to interpret it for him correctly so that he will have it. So in ancient days, before modern times, if the Ochami spoke falsely, they were executed. Luckily, those times have changed, but you hear that story many times. You could not tell lie. If the Ochami lied, they would distool because you're given false information. So the Ochamis represent very powerful. And sometimes when the Akom.For goes to a festival or to something and someone is challenging him, he will tell his Ochami, go home, do this ritual at the shrine, etc., for me, and then come back. Your Ochami can perform every ritual that the Akom.For can do except one, cutting the sacrifice. He pours libation, the Akom.For doesn't do that. Your Ochami would pour libation, he accepts the egg sacrifice and gives them to the Bosom. He accepts everything. He can perform all the rituals. The only thing he cannot do is, I should say, to carry the Bosom and cut the sacrifice. Other than that, your Ochami can do everything. And the Akom.For doesn't have to just sit back and this person does that. So your Ochami is a very powerful person that not only in terms of language, but also in terms of knowledge of the shrine, history of the shrine, and their relationship to the Akom.For is very important, and the Bosom.For is very important. And also, the Ochami is the one who can inherit the Akom.For when they pass, because it's always a family member, the Abusia. Normally, the nephew of the Akom.For or Bosom.For is the Ochami. And so they know everything. So when that person, and they're taken from a very young age, so when that person passes, the Ochami is still relatively young and they can inherit the shrine. And so that's the role of Ochami. Yeah, it's very impressive. You know, you have to respect Ochami in terms of his knowledge and understanding of Akom. So kind of got sidetracked on that. You know, that's part of I believe, a lesson in terms of when we're talking about shrine structure. But yes, the Ochami is someone that you have to truly give a tremendous amount of respect to in terms of their knowledge and understanding of protocol of the shrines. And some people, Akom.For, ask for this Ochami to come and use Emrane, which are the invocation to call the Bosom. So he say, Asum Bayan Pija. So that is Emrane. So he said, Asum is darkness. Asum Ba na ye Pija. We want light. So he says to the Bosom that darkness has come. We want light. So, you know, he uses those appellations to stimulate the Bosom and speak to him in a very metaphorical way. But again, as I mentioned earlier, the Bosom speaks a different language that the Akom.For has to know. And if the Akom.For don't know that, they can be distooled. They will not function as Akom.For, Akom.For, mainly Akom.For, and also the Ochami. If the Ochami don't understand the language, they will find someone, so they will give him medicine so he can hear, eyes so he can see things. And all of these are given to the Ochami so he can function in terms of that ability. And it is required while training that you have Ochami to train from day one with you and mature with you, so the Ochami understands the bosom and function with the bosom and is growing in terms of medicine power as the Akom.For. If it's female, she will have her female Ochami the same way. They will grow and develop that ability, the same thing that you will find among, at least there. I can't say how it is in other towns because I've not really visited many shrines outside of the Bono region. And so I cannot say, but it will depend on some of the people here who have more exposure to that to speak on that issue in terms of the training. But far as within the Bono area, you will find that it is very difficult to train if you don't have Ochami. And that's something, again, I mentioned in the book, that when I started training, of course, I had to have a Busia connection and the name symbolized, but then also I needed Ochami. And I went to a Sutipa to ask for his secretary to become my Ochami. And a Sutipa gave me that permission, and therefore I was able to train. So again, that's very much the tradition. You can't just go there alone and say, I want to train. They say, where's your Ochami? Where's your elders, et cetera, et cetera. So you have to have a lot of those things in place.
I have a question.
Sure.
So if you're a female priest, you have to have a female Ochami, or can it be the opposite sex?
I'm not saying you can't, but it's preferable because they're always thinking long terms that inheritance. So it's passed down. I'm not definitely. I've not seen a male Akom.For with a female Ochami. I've not seen that, but I've seen sometimes the female can have one, but predominantly most of the time they would have a female Ochami that works with them. So
Okay.
it's preferable. But again, the stipulation is the menses.
Mm-hmm.
That is for the male, and the bosom is very tight. And if she's at that time, then cannot function. So, that's what's to take into consideration, in terms
Wouldn't
of.
it be easier though if the female priest had a male Ochami? Because that way, when she was at that time, he could always go. He never
Well,
has that issue.
no, I'm saying you can have that, but it's preferable to have female Ochami. And later on, I'll show some of them. They're Queen Mothers, they don't have male Ochami, they have female Ochami. That's a part of nature. Even the Akom.For will go through that herself, having a timely issue. So they adjust to that, but definitely it's preferable to have a female Ochami for female, because again, as I mentioned, they are part of the family and they can inherit. As I mentioned, that the Akom.For, his Ochami is the nephew and can inherit him, and they train along with them. So this person, you're thinking long terms,
Okay.
So, but again, it does. I've seen some where the Ochami is male, but preferably most of the time it's female. Yeah, you see that.
Okay.
Okay. So we have now is Abramo, which are. Oh, any questions any more further questions on what we discussed about? We went a little off topic with Ochami. So any further questions about that? Okay. So now we go into the other thing of Abramo. And these are basically, again, the same thing. You'll find they're all saying the same thing in another way. So one can specialize in one aspect and get the same bulk of knowledge. You can find them relating to each other. So I think it becomes specialized, that some may say, I want to specialize in Adrinkra, get the same knowledge as someone who's in Abramo, or understanding the terms of umbrella, or in terms of other aspects. So the Abramo basically are symbolic messages that are within figurines, and also they are artwork as well. But again, they have within them stories. And when you study the relationships of the Abramo, they are speaking a very metaphorical way of explaining certain things, and you can have them around. And in fact, you see a lot of them on Ochami Poma. When we get to that stage, you'll find they're using a lot of these symbolics. And also, the Sanehene or the treasure would have those aspects. So Imrano is a very important aspect. And so sometimes they deal with not only human beings, but you'll find them in animals, fishes, and different type of geometric shapes. They don't always have to be figurines. They can be in very much looking like Adinkra symbols or very geometric shapes. So they are another aspect. And we talk about Anansi Sem. I think at the beginning I gave the proverb or the Anansi Sem about how the Busum came to town and how the Akom came among the community in terms of how Busum came to the family.
Excuse me, Nana, real quick. With
Yes.
with the Abramu, again, where do you find them? Because I've not seen them in Ghana.
Oh, I collect them like treasures. I have about a few of them. I go around and I collect them
But where do you normally find them? Where?
in the marketplace. I go in Techiman, I go in the market and I collect, and that's what it's one of my mission to collect as many as I can. I have quite a bit of them here. And so I collect them. And so I'm always paying attention to which one I have so I don't repeat it. But I go around in the marketplace and whenever I see one, I collect them. They're rare to find, but you can find them more in those areas, environment. So I collect them, yeah.
Okay,
In
okay.
fact, excuse me 1 second. This is my bag. These are my Abramo. So you see, these are the ones these are the different ones. I don't know if you can see them properly. They're the sword. They're playing Iwari, the game. So I collect them. And so they tell a lot of stories. So
Are those the same things they call brass weights in Ghana? Because I've
yes,
seen
they're
some
gold weights.
jewelry.
They're
That's
gold
the
weights.
same thing?
Gold weights,
Okay.
correct. Yes, Abramo, gold weight. They're cast in copper. Yes, correct. Yes. And they were mainly used by the treasurer and to keep them because depending on their weight, they were able to scale how much gold was used based on that particular weight. So, and they're kept in pouches. They're kept in pouches. I mean, this is not quite a pouch, but I have my own way of them. And so they're very diverse in terms of their knowledge on what they gain. So again, it requires a lot of times this knowledge to be passed on. It's not as easily available as other things. You have to go around special people who understand these weights and what this hidden meaning behind them is and the symbolism behind them. And so you have one where they say, abofra bo noa untumi bo atache, meaning a child can break snail but not tortoise. And so you have a gold which represents that. And in fact, my brother uses that as one of his motto, that a child can break snail but not a tortoise shell. So again, it speaks of your ability and capability. So they have gold weights that represents that, as well as you see them on Ochami Puma, which is the Ochami's umbrella, the staff. You see those stories. So a lot of that, again, as you begin to identify with these things, it speaks about not only your status, but your world and your environment. So the gold weight can represent that as well. Just like proverbs and stories can symbolize that, like someone asks about what is the meaning, that is associated with Kwabena in terms of when you are one with the Lord, there's nothing to fear. So you say, that's my personal thing. Nobody else has that. So whenever you hear that, you think of Kwabena Shrine. So each person should find their own that is unique to them and use it. And then we will associate it with the shrine. So it's the same with these gold weights, same with these proverbs, you know, like I think Botra is like a fire-breathing lion is associated with him. So you see this lion with fire coming out of his mouth, and you have those symbolism there. Subantin Yentun, meaning if you trouble him, he will make your life challenging, is associated with him. Takwesi is Mihunyan Ka Minkachi. If only I had known, I would have. Is associated with Takwesi. I'm not sure what the one is associated with Tamensa, but you find they have the same, like, you know, that is associated with them. So each one, again, should come and state it. And I encourage people, that's what your bosom should do. It should bring all of these things that are connected to you as an Akom.For. And for other people, when you want to develop your status and your family, you collect these things to represent the status of you in terms of your stool, if you have goal weights, if you have proverbs or metaphors, all of these things you can begin to personalize and be a part of you, and it gives you much deeper insight into the culture itself. So, yes.
Just a brief question. I understand the Adrinkra was originated from the Denchera people. So I was wondering if some of these other systems are associated or originated from a particular ethnic group amongst the Akan.
Well, if you study the history of the Asante, they went to Jamine or the Ivory Coast, correct? And they fought with Adrinkra Hene, correct? And they brought back all of his properties with him. And one thing that they said they brought back was his Adrinkra symbol, which he was very well known for. So I know Denchera was one of the first ancient empires. Maybe all these people relate. You know, I'm not saying that is not so. And I believe they all relate in one way or another and share a common culture. But we know that when the Asante came to rise to supremacy, they had to defeat certain power or chiefs or states to gain their supremacy, and they were very successful at that. And definitely Denchera was one of them. Adrinkra was one of them. The Bono were one of them. And so they rise to power. So they were very unique in that sense in terms of amassing power in order to overcome these things. But in doing so, they brought with them all the cultures and treasures of that. And we know that's pretty common in warfare, that you take it and you add it to yours as well. From my knowledge, the Tano River don't run through the Ashanti area. So that's not part of their history. But if they have it, you have to say, okay, is this case, where did it come from? And you hear that about them consulting some of the Tano for wars, and it's very much documented in a lot of terms how they went and consulted these shrines and basically took over these towns which had these powerful shrines in order to increase their power. But definitely, from what I'm understanding in Jamine, that the Adrinkra Hene was the main one who utilized them, or maybe he's the one that popularized them, I'm not sure. But nonetheless, it's associated with him, and it's used in terms of his name. So he was called Adrinkra Hene. I forgot what his first name was, but that term is used in terms of those. So, but I wouldn't leave out Denchera because they were a very powerful state at one time.
None of the Ashanti also went to, when they were taken to Jamaica, carried the culture and the same symbolism there. So Akoben is
Yeah, the
another
horn.
symbol, but they call it an abeng
Right.
in Jamaica, and it's the same thing. It has the
Exactly.
same meaning and symbolism.
And it's the same, like, because they went to Trinidad as well. They're very interesting. I sent it to some of my families. They went to Trinidad and established a link there. They're very much doing that. And I heard the Asante Hene speaking in Trinidad, making that connection with the people there and linking them up. But I think they are being very much so making that connection and rallying them. And I think that's just how the Asante are. They're very much in terms of unifying their power and also, but it's not to say they're the only ones that I think Fante went there, people from other areas, definitely the Bono went there as well, because I'm a prime example of that. If you explain that that my bosom comes from the Bono area, and I have it, and it took me back to his town. So it definitely exists there. But I believe Fante is there because there's a street called Kobina Street, and Kobina is the Fante equivalent of Kwabena. So I grew up around that street without realizing the significance of that. And then later on, I said, oh, my bosom name is Kwabena also, and I'm in that street. So maybe connection, maybe not. But nonetheless, I find it quite interesting. So I think as you begin to research the language, you can begin to distinguish which group more so had a great influence there. But I believe definitely the Fante, the Akan, the Sante, and the Bono, more or less. I don't know to what degree, but definitely the Asante is making that, they're reaching out more so than others to make that connection, very much so in the diaspora. Yeah. So now we talk about Brahmane Bisa, it's riddles. And so again, while in training, the priest would give you these riddles, and it's basically to keep a sharp mind. And I remember the first one Nana Donko gave me, which came first? I did not listen on accident. So he's asking me, which came first? So that way he had many riddles, and unfortunately I didn't pursue it enough because so much was happening, but little tidbits you get in terms of Abromene Abisa, in terms of these riddles and things. And they have a tremendous amount of repository of these knowledges. And sometimes it can be a bit overwhelming, especially when you're training to grasp all of that. And if you're not spending enough time there to digest all of it, you're not getting the full things, the scope of it. But I believe that is also another aspect of knowledge base. And then Suba, which is funeral dirges. And this is very interesting because there are particular women who are expertise at this, and they're able to sing these particular songs, speak of not only their relationship with the departed person and the loss it has brought upon them, but also to give honor to the departed person. So again, it's associated with the drum text because the drumming also offers condolences. That's what I said, Damarifia, 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 condolences, condolences, condolences. And so you see that term a lot when there's sorrow. The drum plays it. They sing it in terms of the dirges. And also people communicate that way. If you have a loss, they will say Damarifia, Damarifia. So again, these are the aspects. And so here we talk about the Ochami. So again, here I have asked photos of male Ochami, and these are the female Ochami. Now, who wouldn't want one if you were female to have one of these women there? Of course. So it shows, again, they carry a very significant role. In terms, we're all familiar with male Ochami, but in Techiman, you're seeing all of these female Ochamis showed up. And I took this picture, I think, yeah, I'm wondering, definitely this one is when it was, I think the chief was celebrating his Yam festival. In fact, their Santa Hene came, the Mampon Hene, and a lot of them came to this festival. I have some photos of it, but I didn't want to put too many of them up. But you see all of their Asante Hene, the Mampon Hene, Denchira Hene, all of them came to the Techiman Yam Festival where he was celebrating it. I have some of it on videos and a tremendous amount of photos. In fact, the president from Ghana was there as well, and he has security. So they came to his Yam Festival in Techiman. So it's quite a sight to see the Techiman, and they had a big Durbar as well there, and all these Ochamis were there. So here we have female Ochami in terms of that. And so the top part here is removable, and they can put different ones on top depending on the occasion. And so it speaks of each one has their own uniqueness. And when you begin to study it, each one has their own, which is associated with their family, their status, their role that they're playing, and also determine the occasion that they're going to. So perhaps they're going to consult someone, they would change the hair to represent that status and give information to let you know that what this is. So again, they are very diplomatic in terms of that. In fact, one of the elders wanted to give me one back many years ago, and I kind of was a bit heavy. It was expensive, And as I thought about it, I should have tried to get one. So that is lost, but he was going to give me Ochami Puma, and it was covered with gold. My concern was, how am I going to bring this back to America when it's all this gold coming through custom and all of that? So I kind of hesitated on it, but I regretted later on. I should have tried to get it because it was a rare occasion to get the Ochami Puma. And in terms of that, so they're very symbolic. They're very proverbial. And I mentioned Nanifa has one. Child can crack a snail, but not a turtle. And that was his Ochami Puma staff, that he used for terms of that. So again, these represents the different aspects of things that if you choose to, you can pursue them and gain a tremendous amount of knowledge and add it to your knowledge here in terms of what role you can play in terms of a shrine, because all shrines and all people in the culture should have these things affixed to them in terms of to support their work, to support their world, and to basically embolden their status as promoters of the culture. So if there's any questions at this time concerning these, I know it's a bit dry, this conversation in terms of this, but nonetheless, this is a part of the knowledge that one has to really put time into to understand the culture and not only focus on Akom, but it supports and prompt up Akom itself, because all these people are basically within the culture and they overlap. And it's not saying one is basically here or there. They're all overlapping and they all serve a purpose. So if there are any questions about this?
I just wanted, well, from listening to this is sort of like establishing that we have a literate culture. I mean,
Yes,
because,
definitely.
Europeans, when they came and did not find any books, they said, oh, these people are illiterate. But in fact, this is our body of literature.
Yes.
And at least in my opinion, it requires a higher consciousness to be able to interpret, practice, and comprehend all these symbols,
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to a culture that, just read words and you can memorize that.
Right.
But if you can understand the symbolism in the cloth, the drumming and
Right.
people's hand gestures, and
Right.
it's a much more, it requires a much more elegant and complex culture.
Yes.
And a more developed consciousness to be able to put all this into practice, in my opinion. So this is our body of literature. So the question is, can you make this available to those? I mean, this document, can you make that available to us?
Definitely I can. But and part of that I leave for, I have, in fact, there's a book written by it's from Ivory Coast, someone they wrote on Abramo. In fact, Nana Sakyi is the one who told me about it. It's a very extensive, very in-depth book about the Abramo, so it's both in French on one side and English on the other side, and it's highly, very well documented book that deals with that. So these things are available that if you want to do it. And also I mentioned this book about, you can see it, talks about sacred stools. It has within it a lot of the stools that breaks them down and explaining them and giving proper respect to them and who has them and where it should go. And we should be very careful of just not going and taking something within the culture, but understanding its nuances and how it is used within the culture so we don't breach things. And that's, to me, is very important that we really understand that aspect as well. So as we gain more knowledge and insight into that, we begin to know how to navigate ourselves within this world, because it is very deep. There was one man I wanted to get from him. I think it was either Proverbs or stories, but he wouldn't divulge it to me. And my brother was saying, ask him. Maybe he'll give it to you. But he wouldn't do it to me because why? He don't know me. I just came from abroad. and he was very suspicious of me. So he did not want to share his knowledge with me. But they said this man was a living library of all the knowledge. And I wish I had the opportunity to be there longer and meet him, but he had passed. Subsequently, he had passed. But he had this body of knowledge everybody was talking about, incredible in terms of that. So a lot of these elders have left, and a lot of this knowledge has left with them as well, but some have still remained. Some of it is still there that we can get it, but with modernity, it's putting it into threat because a lot of the younger people are not doing this,
Now, you
Now,
showed a book
Pastor,
that
what was the name?
I just want to
Stool?
ask one follow-up question. You
Yes,
showed a book that interpret the symbolism that are on the stools. Is that what you were showing?
yes, yes. It's
Yeah,
called
that's what I was just asking.
it's
Right.
called The Sacred Stools of the Akan by Peter Sapon.
Uh-huh. Where by Peter Sapon. Okay, how do you get that?
I had these books so long ago. I don't even know if they're in print. I would say try and see. I
How
can.
how long is it?
I've
I mean,
had
how many
this
pages?
book for quite a while. I can't.
How many pages is it?
Oh, I see. It's got over 80 pages.
Oh, it's really long.
Well, nah. But
Well, I'm just wondering if it can possibly be copied, but that would be very difficult to
yeah,
copy.
yeah, yes. It's very in depth, and he's using a lot of the images that Ratchett did in his book called Religion and Art. Some
Hmm.
I'm Ratchett wrote what we call Religion and Art in Ashanti, where he shows all of these stools and all of these go. So Rattray really covers a lot of territory in his books, and I think as the question is getting access to them now, if we take the time and reading. So, but a lot of it is that I try to get it on field there in town rather than so much from these books, but I think they're still available. They're better for than not. If you're not there, they're the next best thing. And from what I've compared, some of them are very accurate, and some of them are culturally biased, especially with Ratcher in some regards. But some of it he does a good job in trying to accurately as possible portray some of the things and document them. But I always try to find firsthand the names, references. There's there's one on shrine architecture, which it was written about all of how shrines were decorated back in the 1800s, etc. You can't find those books anymore, but it shows you how the relief was put on these shrines, and they were also that's other aspect which I haven't covered here about the symbolism and the knowledge base of these reliefs that are put on and carved on shrines, houses. And so that's another aspect of knowledge there that one can explore.
Could you give me the title of that one by Peter Sarpong again?
Yeah, it's called The Sacred Stools of the Akan.
Okay.
And he wrote it, it was published in 71.
Right. Really hard to get.
Yeah. It's like, yeah. But it's a very good book, that it will give it to you. And he has a lot of information in there about the stools, and it's very useful. So I think that in itself is remarkable because most Akom.For wear stool with one single column rather than the elaborate ones, and that's very important. And in fact, he has in there a stool which I dreamt about. One of my bosom came and showed me this is a stool. So when I go to Ghana, I'm going to go to a stool carver and have them make it to put my shrine on, and it's a stool sitting on top of a stool. I've never seen one before, but I came and showed it to me, and when I was looking in that book, I saw one like such a stool do exist. So sometimes these are things that helps us to better understand our shrine, in terms of how we are making ourselves more. I don't know what our time is like, but basically I was going to use this opportunity to talk about the calendar if we want to.
No, we're at it's 8:37 right now,
Okay.
so
Wow.
we pretty much gone past our
Okay.
time. So I think this can probably definitely be saved for another time.
Okay.
Because the calendar is very
Yeah, it's very in
challenging.
depth.
Yeah, it's very challenging
And
within
then
itself.
I have one to print out here so people can see how it follows and also what these terms mean. And yeah, so it will take a moment and quite an orientation to understand it. But let's see, as far as these things which I've covered, any questions for people who feel that they are not necessarily too involved with the Akom.For and things, but would like to understand more about the shrine and the culture that they found that it may be useful to them or not. So if anyone wants to say anything, about it, you don't have to be a Akom.For anything, just anyone else, that may find it useful or not for them.
Actually, I was gonna say that I was trying to find in my computer this book.
Any luck?
No, no, there's a book. It's all in tree and it's on the
And
uh,
Yam
on the drum language.
Oh,
And
Ayan.
yes, that's it.
Okay. That's a good book. If you can get it,
Yeah, it's all, and I was trying to find it, but if you already have it,
I
great.
have it. I have the book on Ayan, yes.
Right.
The sacred stool
Yam.
seems like it's sold in Europe. If you have a
Really?
European connection in
Wow.
England or someplace, you should be able to get it. And
Okay.
it doesn't seem as if it's that expensive. It's like 25 euros.
Hmm.
So I'm going to see if I can find someone to buy a copy.
And
I
Yam,
just
Found
put
that
the
and
on
link in the
Yamate,
you
and
chat.
found it on
Yamate.
Amazon.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, she put a link in the chat. Yes.
Great.
Okay, well,
Can you
good.
say the name of that book again? On the drumming
Ayan,
book?
it's called Ayan, Ayan. It's on,
Ayan.
yeah, and there you'll find all of the drum texts. The one that I like, a try a try so hand in the pan in your book, so yeah, so if all of that is within the drum text. Yeah. So the Ayan has that.
Is
Yeah.
there an author? Who is the author? Or
Yeah, it does have an author.
Yeah, it was this
And
master. It was one of the great
is it in Ketia?
yes, I think it was in
Right.
Ketia.
Okay. Ketia, right.
There's uh there's a professor at Tufts University now he's actually Guan, but his father was Ampene who wrote about the Guan history.
Right.
But his son is at Tufts and in the music department. And he gave me a long lecture about Nyansa, and because we were talking about creation stories, and one of the creation stories is a drum text.
Yes.
And then he began to talk about what Churma actually means, because it really doesn't translate into English.
Right.
People just say it's master drummer, but it's not just master.
Right.
It's a storyteller who's a drummer.
Exactly.
Right.
So that's Chirima. Yeah. Yes. Chirima Kudia. Right. Exactly. So, and again, that's important to understand that how a lot of time people out of the cultural context are interpreting these things incorrectly, and we're following that. But it's quite interesting when you begin to understand how they're seeing this and understand it from their perspective or their point of view, gives you an entirely different interpretation. Yeah. But I think this is, I mean, from what I'm sensing here, this is what it takes for us to take what we're doing to the next level, this base knowledge, and take it to the next level so that we begin to fully comprehend what this is all about. Because it's like, I'll tell you a brief story. It's like sometimes my bosom challenges me. Years ago, and it's in my book, when I started training, the bosom came to me in dream and said he's waiting on a Tiokosa. This was within 89. So I got caught up with training and other things and put that way back in my memory and did not follow suit on that. So all these years, flash forward to 2016 or 15, 16, 15, okay, so my wife's going, 16. He came to me again and said, if you don't get this shrine, I will refuse to work for you anymore.
Hmm.
And I said, oh, I got problems. So I went home, pleaded my case, and brought back Atiokosa. Then the bosom was happy. Okay, so that way I'm functioning now. So I took a long time from 89 to 2016 to complete. A bit slow, but that's how long. Now I fed him, and my wife is a witness. He's saying, I'm taking you to the next level. He said, if you want me to do these things, you have to come into my world. And he said, English will not do it. I speak Tree decently, but I can do better. And he's saying, I want you to learn complete language, everything for me to work and function. Otherwise, he's, the bosom is going to create challenges for me to function and use it. So again, they will guide you and push you to a level. And what is interesting, my teacher said to me, said, your only problem while I was training is the language. And he would say, tree would pa, which means tree is your big medicine. He said, if I solve this problem, he said, I would have no issues with the bosom. So now I kind of delayed and got caught up here because there's very few people you can really talk to and keep up the language. So you kind of get lazy with it. So now he's pushing me to talk more with people at home and get the language much better so the bosom work. So again, what I'm saying is that when we're truly connected with the bosom, they will guide us and put us in the vehicle which allows it to function properly, which not only allows us to function within that world, but also to use all that is available within that language so that we can function with these bosom, because this is where they come from. This is their nature. This is their environment. And I'm sure a lot of us speaks English with the shrines, but that's not their mother tongue. That's not their language. That's not their world. And when we begin to understand it, as Nana Sakyi was saying, that sometimes they are translating things in the wrong way. But when we understand the language and we're speaking to the people, that we can get the true interpretation of these meaning and what they truly represents within the culture. And then the bosom taps into that, into our subconscious, and is able to use it and do a lot more. And in essence, that is how the bosom touches the earth. So a lot of it has to do with us in terms of the work that is required from us. The great effort to do this is not easy. So the bosom saying, a bosom som edin. So to serve the bosom or to work with them is very difficult. And that's a saying they say a lot. A bosom som edin. It is very hard to do this work. And so therefore it is required of us to make a great effort in order to bring about the desired. Otherwise, we have to say, what are we doing with this? Are we playing with it? Are we serious? So if we take this truly to our heart, these are the things by which we have to really delve into. And this is what has been removed from us, which has basically stripped us from our lineage and our heritage and our base of knowledge and make us vulnerable to other people's influences, which takes us away from who truly we are. So I think by understanding these things, we can begin to get closer to how our ancestors think, acted, and worked, and then how other things has come to strip that away from us and give us a false narrative. And therefore, we think we're doing something, but we really could do better with it, you know. So I wish everyone much success in terms of that, and pursue it and take it very seriously into heart and try to understand it. And I will definitely get it posted in the text so people can have those aspects, even though they mentioned the ayan would be another one to add to this list in terms of that with the drum text. So all of that is very important. So I think, you know, we can make it happen.
All right. Are there any more questions? It's 8:47 right now. Any more questions for Nana before we end out for the day? It's a Friday. I'm sure you guys had a long weekend, a long week. So the
One
weekend's about to
question
start.
in the chat. Someone have a question in the chat? Oh, that's something that's posted. Okay.
Let's look.
Alma just had one thing. If he could make one reference like a book. See, given that Akwesida is Sunday, do you have any like even a book or something for reference for on the calendar?
It's hard to say because
Okay.
it is unique. I mean, for example, from my understanding, most Asante and Latte practice Akwesida, correct? Which is a Sunday. We don't use that term. We use Kru Kwesi is our equivalent to that. So again, the calendar is a little different, and you have to understand which word means one. I think they use Wukudai, but I don't think we don't use that word. We use Krupadawoko. We use Munoko. And so we have different terminology, and that's something I will go over. So it's hard to find text or anything written because most of the things that are written are either on the Aquapim or the Asante. Very few on the Bono calendar. And their calendar is very specific. It's very organized, and it can be a bit intimidating to some degree, but once you get familiar with it, it's easy to follow. And they have 6 uh, prefixes that are used that are attached to the day. Like today is Nwana Fie. So today is a day that on a Friday. And so you begin to learn those days. And tomorrow will be Enchi Mene. So you begin to learn those days and what those prefixes mean that are attached to the day. And so you can get very specific. What I did, it took me a long time. I went back in time, used a perpetual calendar, but more the work was writing out to find out which day was I born on Wednesday, but which one? Is it Kru Kwa Munofon Nuana Inchi or Kru? And I took me exhaustively a lot of paper to go back all these years to the day that I was born. So that way I know when that day comes around, that's my special day, that I can give honor because that's the day I was born. So I wasn't born on Nwana Wukwo or Fo Wukwo or Kwa Wukwo, but on this particular day. And so it gives a more uniqueness to that day. So whenever it comes around, I know that's my true soul day in terms which I'm born. Yes, a Wednesday, but which one? So again, the Bono calendar can get very specific in terms of that and tell you which is authentically your soul. So once I lay it out, the hard work will be on you to go back so many years and accurately plot it. And so you can know which day you were born on. And that becomes your special soul day, your kradi.
In the course of our conversation or discussion, we've made reference to Bono, Dentra,
yes,
Santi,
yes,
so all of these are Akan people,
yes,
but maybe there needs to be a separate discussion in terms of like, well, what is the difference?
Yeah.
What's the origin of these different Akan people?
Right.
Because each one of them has brought different things to the culture,
right?
And but they're distinct differences as well. But they're all Akan.
And they refer to them in terms linguistically. So they say Bono Akan, they speak Bono, Asante Akan, Akom Fanti Akan, and they are dialects, but also they're also cultural. So I don't want to get too long into who is first and who is this and blah, 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 because all of that can be divisive in many sense. But the key is that there are distinguished differences within them. And also a lot has to do with the environment from which they originated from. So when you study the Bono, they come out of a forest environment. And they're very specific about how that environment came about and how they moved more into the city and how they took that knowledge base with them and how they range and lived for a long period of time among that before things came in. And the Bono speaks an entirely different language. They will tell you, if you speak Asante Tree, it's hard to understand Bono because I've heard people say, I don't understand. In fact, Nana Daku, while he was here, I used to try to get him to translate some of the songs. He said, I don't understand that language. And he could not translate it because it was Bono. He spoke Asante, but he couldn't understand the Bono, the dialect itself. He said, I don't know that language. And so it limited. So a lot of it I had to rely on my memory of it. I wanted to check it was accurate, and I wanted him to check and see, am I interpreting this correctly? But he could not interpret the language. So again, it is very specific, in terms of that, the dialect itself. And so, they like, for example, what I understood is that if I'm eating, I'll say, Asante will say, mere didi, I am eating. So the re represents an ing. Bono will not say that. They never speak like that. It's a mere didi. Or miracle, Bono will not say it's a miracle. And so a lot of it, the language is a little different in terms of not only in how we pronounce it, but also in terms of how it's writing. I don't profess to be an expert on it, but from my exposure, when you hear them and they come to Asante, you find out they don't speak. And I think Asante say Akwesi, they put an A before Akwesi, I believe. If I'm correct, someone correct me.
Correct. That is correct.
Right. Bono don't do that. They don't say it. And so I'm not sure, like Bono will say Kwaku. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Santi will say Kwaku. Is that correct or not? But I know the Bono will say Kwaku for Kwaku, and they will definitely have a different pronunciation in terms of their language. So a lot of it is dialect, of course, but it gets much deeper in terms of that.
Right. So if there
Nana,
are linguistic differences.
So, Mpacho, it's getting to 9 o'clock, and I want to be respectful of people's time, so I don't want to.
Okay. No problem. I agree with you.
There was one last question. A brother named Chris Jackson says, "Can Nana Sakyi talk about any experience with shrines and cultures from the north? If there are any similarities, perhaps the next session he can expound."
Sure. Yeah,
So I want to acknowledge his.
Okay. I'll do my best. Can't say that I'm proficient in it, but from my interaction with my teacher, his shrine was from the north mostly, and I can tell some stories that even while communicating with Bosunri relates to me in terms of his culture and how the behavior and character, but nothing really in depth as some people who have probably been more up north than I have. The farthest I've been probably is Ampuma, where John Bibi is. And that's just the edge of the Bono area. But yeah, we can talk. And I'm sure other people here may have some stories about the northern shrines. Yeah.
All right. So with that being said, what we're going to do, Nana Sakyi and I will get together and talk and try to determine when the next session would be. So what we've been doing is we've been putting together every 2 weeks, trying to do something. We're about to go into the holiday season.
Right.
So we'll discuss and have some conversation. If anything that people would like to be expounded upon or something that was talked about, you can either email myself or Nana Sakyi, put it in the group text or in the chat, and we can use that as basis for future conversations.
I would like to say something before we get off, is that the object of this is to get more involvement from you all rather than me just talking so much. I find I'm doing too much talking and not enough response from the audience. I give to give back. So I think, I don't know if whatever it be, but feel free to ask any question or contribute to what we're doing, because metiri kesieba mintumi swanina, and there's a problem. If I have a big head, I can't carry the whole load. So the thing is that we need all of us to contribute to this, and no question is ever insignificant. We can all learn from something so that everybody can share and contribute to this, because it's not about one person. It's about us collectively coming together to make this a reality. And each one should feel they have a voice, a say in this. And that's what I'm looking for. I'm gauging for that. So I'm not just talking, but basically listening to what you all have to say and contribute to this is what primarily is what I would like to see in all of this, rather than this dry talking about this and this and this. let's have a conversation. Let us talk about Akom, about things, and what there's no question out of context. You know, it's like, you know, like Miles said, there's never a wrong note. We'll make it fit somewhere, you know, so no question is out of context. We'll make it fit within the conversation somehow or another. So that is what my aspiration is for, that we can all contribute to this that we're embarking on. You know, we're doing something very special, and we are setting something down, a foundation very special that will last. So let us all contribute to its growth and development, you know, and make it something that will benefit our future generation. Thank you.
Madasi,
Thank you, Nana.
Keith, for everything. I think these conversations, even though you feel like you're doing a lot of talking, we're doing a lot of listening
Right.
because we're touching on things that many of us have never even heard before. So
Okay, so that's
that's
okay.
probably why you feel like you're doing so much talking, but we are doing a lot of listening.
Okay, okay. I get it. Thank you for explaining that. Thank you. Okay. So I'll make sure I have a glass of water with me next time.
Okay.
Okay. So
Well,
my
good.
mouth won't get dry.
Well, good night, everyone.
Thank you, Nana, for
But,
your effort and all
um,
that you're doing, and appreciate you and everyone. Thank you all very much for taking time out and sharing it with us.
Good night, everyone. Have a great night. Have a great weekend.
Good night.
Good night, Madasi. Thank you for everything. This is
Oh,
wonderful. Thank you.
Good night.
good night.